Hi there, I'm Kathy Barker from Software Solutions, and you're watching the first of a collection of videos about Microsoft Power BI Desktop. What we have here is Power BI Desktop opened, and sometimes you get this startup screen. If you don't want to see this startup screen, you can untick this option here. But if you just want to get rid of it for now, just hit the X in the top right corner. So what is Power BI? First of all, the BI stands for Business Insights. So Power BI is a very strong tool which allows you to connect to data from a variety of sources, shape that data, and be able to produce reports. Reports for yourself or for others that can be published to a Power BI service and basically be accessed from any device, from anywhere. What I want to do in this particular course is I want to look at connecting to and shaping and transforming data. So I'm therefore focusing on Power Query. Now Power Query is a query engine that sits within inside of Power BI, but also sits within inside of Excel. Power Query is very strong because it allows you to connect to data in a variety of sources. In fact, you'd be pretty pressed to try and find a data source that it doesn't connect to. When it connects to the data, it then allows you to shape and transform that data and clean that data. And that basically prepares it for creating reports. Either create reports for others or allow others to create their own reports. So I want to focus on bringing data in to Power BI and shaping that data. Now the first thing I need to talk about is where your data is stored. If you store your data, that might be an Excel workbook, in a local drive, then basically you can import it into Power BI, but it isn't moved into Power BI. Instead, a new data set is created in Power BI. And therefore, there's no real syncing going on effectively. So if you've got a data set that's regularly changing and you need to be able to synchronize that data set with Power BI, you're best to locate that file on either OneDrive for Personal or OneDrive for Business or even SharePoint. They're a better cloud location for data that's constantly changing. So have a good think about where your data should be stored and connected to. I want to look at, first of all, getting some Excel data into this Power BI file. Now, an Excel file is considered a flat file, and that is, there's no hierarchy or no relationship with the data. It's just flat and non-dimensional. Every row is just a record. So how do we get data into Power BI? One way is to head to this group here that you see my mouse moving around, called Data. It's on the Home tab. You can get an Excel workbook, you can get an SQL server connection going, or you can even enter your own data into Power BI. But what I want to have a look at is this button, Get Data. By hitting this button, I can choose from a variety of common data sources that I want to connect to. And so I'm going to start with a flat file, which is an Excel workbook. So I click this option here. Now I go and choose the spreadsheet or Excel workbook that I want to connect to. And I'm going to start by choosing 2021 sales, which I've got on my OneDrive. And if I open that, then what happens is a little connection message pops up for a second because it's not a very big data set, and the navigator window appears. Now the navigator window is giving me two options, and they've got different symbols. This option here, this symbol here, looks like a worksheet, and that's because that is the sheet inside the file called Sales 2021, and you get the option of bringing that in. Or what someone has done is they've actually formatted the list or the data inside of that workbook as a table. And so this is a reference to the table or to the sheet. I'm going to bring the sheet in, so I tick this option. I'm immediately given a preview of what the data looks like. And if I click load, it'll just load into Power BI. But I don't want to just load into Power BI. I actually want to transform it and shape it and fire up Power Query. So the transform data button will allow you to fire up Power Query to start transforming it. So let's go for that option. Immediately, I'm thrown into the Power Query editor, and you can see that in the top left corner here. I can see I've got one query. So a table is also known as a query in the Power Query editor. I can see the data quite clearly that I've brought in, and even in the bottom left I can see that there's 384 rows and 6 columns that have been brought in. Now the Power Query Editor is a separate window to the Power BI window. And one of my favorite key combinations when I'm working with multiple windows is to hold the Windows key on your keyboard and press the right arrow. So I'm going to go Windows right arrow. Now what that does is that puts Power Query on the right hand side. And because I've got a variety of other windows on the left hand side, it's going, which other window do you want to use to occupy the left hand side of your screen? So I'll say that I actually want to use Power BI on the left-hand side of my screen. So I give it a click. And now I've got Power Query on the right-hand side and Power BI on the left-hand side. So that's quite handy. You can just flip between them as you would with normal applications. But if you've got the screen size, put them side by side. So we've brought one Excel workbook into Power Query and into Power BI. Let's go and get some more data. And I want to get the data using Power BI, though I do notice over here in the Power Query Editor, there are some get options over here. But let's just stick with this for now. Let's go to the Get Data button and the Excel Workbook button, and let's bring in Bike Customers. I'll choose Open, and the navigator will come up. The navigator this time only gives me one option, so someone hasn't formatted the list in that spreadsheet as a table. So I only get the option to bring in the sheet called Customers. If I give that a tick, I can see the data, and if I click Transform Data button, it'll bring it straight into Power Query, which is exactly what I want. When I look at the Power Query Editor, and particularly the left-hand side, I can see I've now got two queries, or two tables that I've imported. There's Sales 2021, and I can look at the data by clicking it, and there's Customers, and I can look at the data by clicking it. So that's how you bring flat files or Excel files into Power Query, and now we're in a position to transform that data. I just want to bring in one more Excel file, and this time, just to mix it up a little, I'm going to use the Power Query Editor side instead of the Power BI Excel data or Get Data buttons. Instead, what I'm going to do this time is I'm actually going to go to New Source and Excel Workbook. So this is another way that you can bring data straight in. I would like to bring in the file called Orders History. So on my OneDrive, there's Orders History, and I open it. And what I eventually see is the navigator, and I have a choice. I have a choice of bringing in a sheet, or I bring in a particular data set. So I'm going to actually just bring in the sheet called Orders. And I'll click OK. And now I have three queries on the left-hand side of my Power Query Editor. It doesn't arrange them in alphabetical order. They appear in the order in which you brought them in. You can drag them up and down, but I'm happy with that for now, and we'll look at things like that more closely shortly.